The right investment does a couple of things. One is, for the first time ever, we're able to see exactly where and what communities people come from who are incarcerated in state prisons in Maryland. And we're able to look deeply into those communities and see both the costs in terms of what we're spending to incarcerate these people, which on average is $5 million per community, as well as the total, some as high as $17 million, for example, in Sandtown, Winchester, that we're spending on incarceration. And the unfortunate reality is we're getting little outcomes from that, little positive outcomes. We're not increasing public safety, and we're not supporting these communities in the ways that we know will make it less likely that people from those communities end up in our prison system. So in the report that we've just issued, we were able to show, and it demonstrates that there's nearly $300 million a year that are being spent to incarcerate people from Baltimore. Those are costs that are paid by taxpayers throughout the state when you talk about the state's correction system, which totals almost $1 billion a year. And as the research shows, it's not money being well spent. We're not really getting good outcomes for that expenditures, and there's other ways we could spend that money that would be more effective. So what we know, both based on research and just based on our own experiences, is that communities that are safe have basic things going on in them, and that is opportunity for people to do well in their lives, and so that means opportunity to access a decent education, a decent job, housing, the basic things that we need. And what we see in the communities, particularly in Baltimore, that are where most people who are incarcerated are coming from, these are, unfortunately, not surprisingly, very distressed communities. So on a number of indicators that we looked at, whether that was income, educational attainment, housing issues, they are very, very challenged in those ways. And so it shouldn't surprise us that when we have concentrated poverty, particularly in communities that are suffering from a range of issues, that we have crime that goes on. Currently, Maryland taxpayers pay $37,000 a year per individual. Right? For that same $37,000 a year in the Baltimore neighborhoods where individuals are coming from, we could pay for employment training for 7 people. We could pay 2-bedroom housing costs for over 30 people, and we could pay for education for GED programming. And if we do those types of things, not just in Baltimore, but in communities around the state, those are the types of things that we know would make it less likely for people to end up in prison. So there's a clear trade-off here, and those numbers add up into the millions every year. And so there's an opportunity for Maryland lawmakers, for policymakers to make decisions about how they're spending those resources in order to get better outcomes. To put this in context right now, Maryland is a state that is spending more on incarceration than many states across the country. And there are a number of places throughout the country, including on the West Coast and in the South and throughout different states, where there's conversations that are happening about how to reduce the reliance on incarceration. And really, there are conversations that are now happening across the aisle, both Democrats and Republicans really coming to consensus on the fact that incarceration is not getting the outcomes that we want, and we're spending lots of money on that. We think that there's potential for this type of conversation in Maryland. There are people who are starting to have these discussions, and our hope is that those discussions will be driven and informed by data. And this type of research really should be valuable for people having discussions about when they're making decisions where to deploy their resources. There's a recommendation by a special legislative commission that issued a report in 2013 to expend up to $500 million over 10 years. I was glad to see that Governor Hogan did not include that expenditure in his budget for this year, and I think that creates opportunity to have discussions about what is the right course to take at this time. And there's an opportunity to partner with the MacArthur Foundation, hopefully, in these discussions. And so I think the governor rightly decided that that wouldn't be the best expenditure for the state at this time.